It's shallower than I thought. What a letdown, my mother-in-law sneered as she pushed me into the pond. I had endured her cruel antics for so long, but in that moment, something inside me snapped. My name is Jasmine. I'm 30 years old and have been a stay-at-home wife for 7 years. I live with my husband Gordy, who is 8 years older than me, our 6-year-old daughter, and Gordy's mother. Gordy was my boss, and I was his subordinate. Growing up, my parents divorced, and I lived with my mom. I guess I always yearned for a father figure. Gordy, being older and competent at his job, seemed very appealing, but I never had a chance to get close to him. He was just someone I admired from afar. However, during a team-building event, we bonded over our shared love for movies and hit it off. We started dating, and I fell head over heels for the mature and kind Gordy. About 6 months into our relationship, I found out I was pregnant. We hadn't discussed marriage yet, so I was more shocked than happy. I was anxious about how Gordy would react, but I couldn't keep it a secret forever. I mustered the courage and told him. To my surprise, he was thrilled and suggested we get married. I was overjoyed by Gordy's reaction. When I told my mom, she was a bit surprised but happy for me. My mom raised me as a single mother after my parents divorced due to my father's affair. I was only 2 at the time, so I barely remember my father. My mom worked tirelessly from dawn till dusk to raise me. Being an only child, dinner alone was lonely. But I didn't want to burden my mom. Even though she was busy, she showered me with love, and we have a great relationship. I always thought that when I got married, I didn't want my child to feel lonely. I wanted to build a warm home, so I was determined to have a loving marriage and family. Things moved quickly, and we introduced each other to our families. Gordy had lost his father at a young age and lived with his mother. The first time I met her, she was kind, but I sensed something off in her occasional cold expression. However, she was the woman who gave birth to Gordy, so I brushed off my concerns, thinking she was just nervous. We had a simple wedding with just our families. I was getting the hang of my job and wanted to work until my due date. But Gordy insisted I become a housewife, so I quit. My mom suggested I take maternity leave instead of quitting, but Gordy disagreed. He said his mother was a dedicated housewife, and he wanted the same for me, so I became a housewife. After our marriage, at Gordy's insistence, we moved in with his mother. That's when my nightmare began. I initially found comfort in having an experienced mother around, but I was naive. My mother-in-law seemed resentful, as if I had stolen her precious son. Her attitude changed completely after our marriage, and she started to torment me. Yes, my initial instincts about her were right. As for Gordy, after our marriage, he became controlling and emotionally abusive. Apparently, his late father had been a dominant figure, and neither Gordy nor his mother could defy him. Mother-in-law was not allowed to work or even go out without permission. If Gordy showed any defiance, he was beaten and berated. Their father's authority was absolute. They endured this together, and when Gordy's father passed away from an illness when Gordy was 22, they celebrated. After that, they lived happily as a duo. I believe the kind Gordy I knew before our marriage was genuine, but after seeing his mother's disdain for me, his love waned. To Gordy, his mother was more important than his wife. Whenever Gordy was cold or verbally abusive to me, mother-in-law looked satisfied. Gordy would appease her, saying, "Mother, I'm married so you can have an easier life. Jasmine will do everything for you." I think the two of them felt some twisted sense of revenge by treating me the way Gordy's father had treated them. It was utterly unfair to me, but I felt helpless. In the early days of our marriage, I suffered from severe morning sickness, sometimes unable to get out of bed. Yet mother-in-law would say, "You're exaggerating this morning sickness thing. Who do you think you are? Get up and make dinner." She even forced me to do household chores. She would make me carry heavy bags and even intentionally push me once. Gordy, of course, didn't defend me. Instead, he would say, "I'm busy working. You're probably just napping all day and you still eat the food I provide." I endured, hoping that maybe when our child was born, mother-in-law and Gordy would change. My mom, concerned about me living with mother-in-law and being pregnant, often called or messaged, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. She had raised me through hardships and always wished for my happiness. I didn't want to worry or sadden her. I always reassured her with a cheerful voice, saying everything was fine, that Gordy and mother-in-law were taking good care of me, and that I was happy. She might have suspected something but always said, "Remember, I'm on your side. Tell me if anything's wrong." Then I safely gave birth to a beautiful girl named Judith. The joy of her birth made me momentarily forget the torment from mother-in-law and Gordy. I vowed to live for Judith from that day on. My mom offered to take care of me postpartum at her home, but mother-in-law, with a smile, said, "Don't worry, we'll take good care of Judith here," denying me the chance to return to my parents. Normally, new mothers rest for a month after childbirth, but my mother-in-law had me working the day after I was discharged. Their treatment of me didn't change after Judith's birth. It got worse. Knowing I was up all night nursing, they still forced me to wake up early for chores. On top of that, I had to care for the baby. I was utterly exhausted, stressed, and sleep-deprived. Mother-in-law, seeing my worn-out state, would laugh, saying I looked like a vagrant. Every night, tears streamed down my face. Judith was my only solace. The one saving grace was that Judith looked like Gordy, so both he and mother-in-law adored her. Though their idea of adoring was just playing with her occasionally, I was relieved because I had feared they might mistreat Judith too. When Judith was about 3, I told Gordy I wanted to work outside. He scoffed, saying, "Who would hire someone like you with hardly any work experience?" Mother-in-law laughed, calling me a useless wife. In truth, I was at my limit and wanted to save money to leave with Judith, but they wouldn't let me work, and I gave up on ever leaving. Who would hire someone with so little experience? I had no money of my own, and for Judith's sake, I realized I had to endure. From then on, no matter how mother-in-law and Gordy treated me, I bore it all for my beloved daughter Judith. Even after 7 years of marriage, mother-in-law and Gordy remained the same. The only change was in Judith. From around age 4, she would sadly watch me being mistreated. When we were alone, she would hug me and say, "Mommy, just bear it a little longer. When I grow up, I'll protect you." Ever since she was little, Judith could sense the unfair treatment I endured, and it deeply hurt her young heart. Her presence alone became my beacon of hope. With mother-in-law and Gordy keeping a close watch, I couldn't freely go out. Even on the rare occasions I went shopping, mother-in-law would accompany me. However, once Judith started attending elementary school, I got the chance to step outside with just her during drop-offs and pickups. Previously, I couldn't even meet my own mother, but sometimes she would wait near the school to see us. So our meetings became more frequent. Whenever we met, my mom would ask, "Are you okay?" I couldn't tell her the truth about my situation, so I always replied, "I have Judith, I'm happy." I had also told Judith to keep our real situation a secret from my mom. Then one day, Judith expressed a desire to visit a community park a bit far from our home. She had heard from friends about a pond there with a family of turtles and was eager to see them. Gordy, being the doting father, said, "If Judith wants to go, I'll take her anywhere," so it was decided that we would visit the park on his next day off. Of course, mother-in-law would come along. The day of our trip to the community park arrived. I woke up at 5 a.m. to prepare sandwiches for the entire family. Making sandwiches took time since Gordy and mother-in-law had big appetites. While I was busy with preparations, the two of them were leisurely playing on their phones. Upon reaching the community park, it was evident that it was a popular spot bustling with families. We quickly headed to the pond to see the turtles, and sure enough, there was a cute family of turtles. Judith was ecstatic, exclaiming, "So cute." I smiled, watching her joy. Suddenly, someone forcefully pushed me from behind, and I fell into the pond. I had a traumatic experience of nearly drowning in the ocean as a child, so I was terrified of water and couldn't swim. Mother-in-law knew this because I had shared the story before. Thrown into the pond, panic overtook me as I flailed around. Judith cried out, "Mommy." Mother-in-law remarked, "Falling into a pond? What a foolish daughter-in-law," and laughed without trying to help. Gordy, laughing, took photos of me in the pond. Seeing their reactions, something inside me snapped. Fortunately, the pond wasn't too deep, and I managed to stand. Mother-in-law, seeing I was okay, said with a hint of disappointment, "It's surprisingly shallow." What a pity. At that moment, I was certain mother-in-law had pushed me. That night, anger kept me awake. I wanted revenge, but considering Judith's future, I thought it might be better to endure and stay with a financially stable Gordy. I spent the entire night thinking. The next morning, on our way to school, Judith turned to me with determination and said, "Mommy, it's okay. Divorce daddy. Grandma and daddy are terrible. I'm on your side. I was touched but hesitant, wondering if divorce was really the right choice. The following day, as we approached the school, I saw my mom. Judith ran to her with joy. I hurried over, curious about their conversation. My mom hugged me, saying, "Why didn't you tell me the truth? You have endured so much." Judith whispered, "Mommy, it's okay, right? I told Granny everything." Mom encouraged me, saying, "Get a divorce. It's okay, you're still young, and you can try again." She then went on to say, "You should hire a lawyer. I'll pay for the lawyer's fees." I'm sorry I didn't notice. From that day, with Judith's help, I began gathering evidence. Gordy's verbal abuse, mother-in-law's derogatory comments, everything was recorded. Unaware of this, mother-in-law and Gordy continued their behavior. Gordy's constant belittling and my mother-in-law's endless insults were all caught on my voice recorder. Unaware of this, both Gordy and mother-in-law continued their hurtful ways. Sometimes I would intentionally tell Gordy, "I want to work outside," to which he would reply, "Who would hire someone like you, idiot?" I would also act sad in front of mother-in-law just to hear her say, "You look so down." Pathetic. With these tactics, I gathered plenty of evidence. Then one day, mother-in-law, who never cared about her salt intake despite her age, suffered a stroke due to high blood pressure and became paralyzed. She was discharged from a hospital, but both Gordy and mother-in-law expected me to take care of her. "Jasmine, you'll take care of me, right? I am so pitiful." "Hey Jasmine, take care of mother. If you're rough with her, you'll regret it," Gordy demanded. I firmly replied, "I won't look after mother-in-law. She's your mother, Gordy. You take care of her." I had never talked back before, so they were momentarily stunned. But Gordy quickly yelled, "You better take care of her." The next day, Gordy left for work. I had no intention of caring for mother-in-law. I planned to ignore her completely. While I was in the living room, I heard mother-in-law calling me from her room. She sounded frantic. I didn't want to help, but I decided to check on her. She looked pale and said, "Jasmine, I need to use the bathroom." I coldly replied, "Go ahead on your own." She cried out, "How could you? Hurry up and help me." Apparently, she had forgotten to wear her adult diapers. She then had an accident and started crying from embarrassment. Filled with a desire for revenge, I didn't help. Instead, I called Gordy's workplace. When he rushed home and saw mother-in-law, he shouted at me, "I told you to take care of her." I calmly responded, "I told you I wouldn't. Have you forgotten how you both treated me?" Mother-in-law kept repeating, "You brute. You brute." I finally handed Gordy divorce papers. He was in shock. I said, "I have had enough. I want a divorce, and of course, I'll take custody of Judith." Both mother-in-law and Gordy were yelling, but when I played the voice recordings, they froze. Gordy's morally harassing commands and mother-in-law's heartless remarks were recorded. I said, "I have all the evidence. I'm confident I would win in court." Gordy muttered, "I can't believe you recorded us." Mother-in-law still shouted, "Judith won't choose you. She won't." When Judith came home from elementary school, mother-in-law sweetly asked, "Judith, who do you want to live with, Grandma or Mommy?" Judith firmly replied, "Of course, Mommy. Grandma and Daddy are always mean to Mommy. I will always live with Mommy. I hate Daddy and Grandma." The two were visibly shaken. It seemed like Gordy was really tired of being told that Judith, whom he loved so much, hated him. "Did you hear that? Judith wants to live with me. Please live peacefully together from now on." I packed my bags and left. I never returned to Gordy and mother-in-law's house. I finalized the divorce through a lawyer. According to the lawyer, Gordy couldn't care for mother-in-law, who was now paralyzed. She was placed in a nursing home, but due to her nasty attitude, no one wanted to be around her. Gordy, devastated by Judith's rejection, couldn't go to work and took a leave of absence. Now Judith, my mom, and I live together, and I'm actively job hunting.